That night started the way most quiet evenings do when you're home alone. My parents had left town that morning to visit my aunt for the weekend, and the house felt unusually still without them there. I had the place entirely to myself, which at first felt kind of nice. I ordered takeout, watched a couple episodes of a show I'd been meaning to finish, and let the evening drift by without thinking too much about anything. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet in the comfortable way suburban streets usually are after dark. Every house on our block had its porch light on, and the occasional car would pass slowly through, tires humming against the pavement. Around 10 o'clock, I gathered the trash from the kitchen and tied up the bag. The bin sat at the end of the driveway, so I slipped on my shoes and stepped outside. The air was cool and a little damp, the kind of night where everything feels quieter than usual. I remember hearing crickets somewhere down the street and the faint buzz of a streetlight above the sidewalk. As I walked toward the bin, I noticed a car parked across the street. It was sitting along the curb directly opposite our house. At first, nothing about it seemed strange. Cars were always parked along that side of the road, especially when people had guests over. The engine wasn't running, but I could see a faint glow from inside the front seat. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were waiting for someone in the nearby houses, or just sitting on their phone before heading inside. I tossed the trash into the bin and glanced back toward the street again. The person in the car hadn't moved. I couldn't see their face clearly, only the dark outline of someone sitting very still behind the wheel. For a moment, I stood there, just looking across the street. Something about the stillness of the car made me pause, though I couldn't really explain why. Eventually, I turned back toward the house and walked inside, locking the door behind me out of habit. I went back to the living room and sat down on the couch, letting the television play quietly in the background. But after a few minutes, I found myself glancing toward the front window. The car was still there, parked in the exact same spot. And for some reason, I had the strange feeling that whoever was sitting inside it hadn't come to visit anyone on the street. It felt more like they were waiting. I told myself I was probably overthinking it, but I still reached for the remote and lowered the volume a little just so I could hear if anything unusual happened outside the house that night. Even then, I kept thinking about that quiet car across the street, sitting there without moving for some reason tonight. For a while, I tried to ignore it. The TV kept playing quietly in the living room, filling the house with the kind of background noise that makes an empty place feel less empty. I stretched out on the couch and focused on the show, but every few minutes my attention drifted back toward the front window. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I stood up and moved the curtain just enough to peek outside. The car was still there, same spot across the street. Same dark shape sitting in the driver's seat. The faint light from inside the car glowed against the windshield, just enough for me to see the outline of someone's head and shoulders. They weren't moving. I let the curtain fall back into place and told myself again that it was probably nothing. Someone waiting for a friend, maybe a rideshare driver who had arrived early. There were plenty of normal explanations. Still, I found myself walking through the house and checking the front door. It was locked. I twisted the deadbolt anyway, just to make sure. Then I checked the back door leading to the yard. Locked too. The house suddenly felt bigger than usual. Every room was dark except for the living room and the kitchen where the overhead light was still on. I went back to the couch and sat down, but I couldn't stop thinking about the car. Another 20 minutes passed before I looked again. This time, I turned off the living room lamp before moving the curtain. Outside, the street looked darker now. The porch lights from the houses down the block cast soft yellow pools onto the pavement, and the car was still there. But something felt different. The driver's head was angled slightly toward my house. I couldn't see their face clearly, but the way they were sitting made it seem like they were looking directly at the front of the house, at my window. I slowly stepped back from the curtain. A strange, uncomfortable thought crossed my mind. Had they seen me earlier when I took the trash out? I walked through the house again, this time turning off the kitchen light. The living room was the only room still lit, and even that suddenly felt too bright. I switched that lamp off too. The house felt quiet and dim. After a moment, I returned to the window again and carefully looked outside. The car hadn't moved. Hours were starting to pass now. It had to be close to midnight. No one had gotten out of the vehicle. No one had approached any of the houses on the street. Just that same parked car and the same person sitting inside it. I began making another slow walk around the house, checking the windows one by one. The latch in the dining room window, the sliding door to the backyard, the small window above the sink. Everything was locked. But as I moved through the dark hallway, a thought kept repeating in the back of my mind. From the street, it would be pretty easy to tell only one person was home. Only one car in the driveway, lights turning off one room at a time. And if someone had been sitting out there watching long enough, they might have noticed something else too. That no one else had come home all night. At some point, the car finally disappeared. I noticed it almost by accident. I had gotten up again to check the window, expecting to see the same dark shape sitting across the street. But when I pulled the curtain back, the space along the curb was empty. The car was gone. For a few seconds, I just stood there, staring at the open stretch of pavement where it had been parked for hours. A slow wave of relief settled in. Whoever had been sitting there must have finally left. Maybe they had been waiting for someone after all. Maybe they realized the person they were meeting wasn't coming. Whatever the reason, it was over. I locked the curtain back into place and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The house suddenly felt normal again. After a while, I decided to head upstairs. It was getting late, and the quiet of the house had started to make me tired. I turned off the downstairs lights, leaving only the dim hallway light upstairs as I walked toward my room. The floor creaked softly under my steps, the familiar sounds of an older house settling for the night. Upstairs, everything was still. I changed into a t-shirt and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, scrolling through my phone. The window beside my bed looked out over the front yard and the street beyond it, but I didn't bother checking outside again. As far as I knew, the car was gone. A few minutes later, I heard something. At first, it was so faint I almost ignored it. A soft crunch, like gravel shifting. I slowly looked up from my phone. The sound came again, this time slightly clearer. Footsteps. Outside. My room overlooked the driveway and a narrow strip of yard that ran along the side of the house. Anyone walking there would be just a few feet from the wall. I stayed perfectly still, listening. Another step, slow, careful, the kind of step someone takes when they're trying not to make noise. My eyes moved toward the window, and then I saw it. A shadow passed briefly across the curtain. It moved slowly, just a dark shape sliding across the thin fabric before disappearing again. Someone was outside the house. My chest tightened instantly. I didn't move right away. I just sat there, listening as another quiet step scraped across the ground below the window. The realization crept in slowly but unmistakably. The car might have left the street, but whoever had been sitting in it hadn't gone far. I carefully stood up and reached for the light switch in my room, turning it off. The hallway light outside my door was still on, casting a faint glow under the frame. I stepped into the hallway and switched that off too. The entire upstairs fell into darkness. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from downstairs,
I heard something that made my stomach drop. The faint rattle of a door handle. Someone was trying the front door, very slowly.
The sound came again. A slow, careful movement of metal. The front door handle was turning. I stood frozen in the upstairs hallway, barely breathing, listening to the faint rattle echo through the quiet house. Whoever was outside wasn't pounding on the door or trying to force it open. They were testing it, gently, like they were hoping it might already be unlocked. The handle stopped moving for a few seconds. The house fell completely silent again, and for a brief moment I wondered if maybe they had given up. Then I heard something else. A soft step across the front porch, followed by another. The person was moving. I slowly backed into my bedroom and pushed the door nearly closed, leaving just enough space to hear what was happening downstairs. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone from the bed. Another noise came from the first floor. This time, it was farther away. A faint sliding sound from the back of the house. My stomach dropped. They were checking the back door now. The house felt unbearably quiet as I crouched beside the bed, holding my phone so tightly my fingers hurt. For a moment, I hesitated, still hoping maybe it was just someone confused which house they were at. Then, the back door handle rattled. Slow, careful, exactly the same way as the front door. That was enough. I opened the emergency call screen and dialed the police, trying to keep my voice low as the line began to ring. While I waited, the handle downstairs moved again. One long twist, then another. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered as calmly as I could that someone was trying to get into my house. I explained that I was home alone and that whoever it was had already tried both doors. She told me officers were on the way and asked me to stay on the line. Downstairs, the noise suddenly stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just silence. Nearly 2 minutes passed like that before I finally heard something outside again. A faint crunch of gravel near the driveway, followed by the distant sound of a car door closing. Then, an engine started. By the time the police arrived a few minutes later, the street outside was empty. 2 officers walked through the house with flashlights, checking every room, every closet, even the backyard. They didn't find anyone. Both doors were still locked. No damage, no forced entry. Just the quiet house and the dark street outside. One of the officers asked if I had noticed any suspicious vehicles earlier that night. I told him about the car that had been parked across the street for hours. He nodded slowly when I described it. About 20 minutes later, as they were preparing to leave, another patrol unit radioed something in. A car matching that description had just been seen a few blocks away, driving slowly through the neighborhood, passing one street after another, like the driver was still looking for a house where someone might be home alone. That weekend, I had the house entirely to myself. My parents had left early Saturday morning to visit relatives a few hours away, and they weren't planning to come back until late Sunday night. Normally, I stayed in my apartment near campus, but since I had a couple days off from work and classes, I decided to spend the weekend at their place. Their house was much bigger than my apartment. It sat near the end of a quiet street with a long driveway and tall trees lining the backyard. During the day, it felt comfortable and familiar, but at night, the size of it became a lot more noticeable, especially when you were the only person inside. That evening, I ordered some food, sat in the living room, and watched a basketball game on TV. The downstairs lights were on, filling the house with a warm glow that made everything feel normal. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Most of the houses on our street belonged to older couples, so things usually settled down pretty early. By 9 or 10 at night, the whole block would be silent except for the occasional car passing through. Around 10:30, I got up to grab a drink from the kitchen. As I walked through the hallway, I heard a faint sound from upstairs. It was quick, just a small thump. I stopped for a second and looked toward the staircase. The upstairs hallway was dark. My parents' bedroom, the guest room, and the bathroom were all up there, and none of the lights were on. I stood there for a moment listening, but the house was quiet again. Old houses make noises all the time, especially at night when everything cools down. Wood shifts, pipes move. Sometimes the vents pop when the air system kicks on. So I didn't think much of it. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet, filled it with water, and went back into the living room. For the next hour, I barely noticed anything unusual. The game played on the TV while I scrolled through my phone, occasionally glancing up at the screen. Then I heard it again. Another noise from upstairs. This time, it sounded more like something lightly scraping across the floor. I muted the television and sat still. The sound didn't repeat. After a few seconds, the silence returned, the same deep quiet that had filled the house all evening. I leaned back on the couch and shook my head a little. The upstairs hallway had thick carpet, and the vents ran beneath the floorboards. Sometimes, when the air system turned on, the vents expanded slightly and made strange sounds. At least that's what I told myself. Still, as I sat there listening to the quiet house, I found myself glancing toward the staircase more often. Because once you notice a sound like that in an empty house, it's hard to completely ignore it. And sometime around 11, just as the game was ending, I heard something upstairs again. A slow, dull sound, like a door shifting slightly somewhere above me. For a while, I'd tried to ignore the noise. The game ended, and the TV switched over to post-game commentary that I wasn't really paying attention to. I sat there for a few minutes scrolling through my phone, but the thought of that sound upstairs kept creeping back into my mind. Finally, I muted the TV again. The house was completely quiet. After a moment, I stood up and looked toward the staircase. Part of me felt a little ridiculous for even thinking about it. I knew how old this house was. I'd lived in it most of my life. At night, it always made small noises here and there. Still, I wanted to check. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and turned on the hallway light that lit the steps. The soft yellow glow stretched up toward the second floor, leaving the far end of the hallway in shadow. Slowly, I started climbing. Each step creaked softly under my weight, the familiar sound echoing through the quiet house. When I reached the top, I paused and looked down the hallway. Everything looked normal. My parents' bedroom door was closed like usual. The guest room door was open slightly. At the end of the hallway sat the bathroom. But something about it made me stop. The bathroom door was closed. That by itself wasn't strange, except for one small detail. The light was on inside. A thin line of light stretched across the hallway carpet beneath the door. I frowned slightly. I was almost certain the bathroom light had been off earlier. My parents always left it off when they traveled. I walked slowly down the hallway until I stood right in front of the door. For a moment, I just stared at the light glowing beneath it. Then, I knocked. Hello? My voice sounded oddly loud in the quiet hallway. No answer. I knocked again, a little harder this time. Still, nothing. A strange feeling crept into my chest. I reached down and tried the handle. It didn't turn. The door was locked. I immediately stepped back. That didn't make sense. No one else was supposed to be in the house. I stood there staring at the door, trying to think of a reasonable explanation. Maybe the lock had slipped somehow. Maybe my parents had accidentally left it that way before they left. But that didn't explain the light. I knocked again. Hello? My voice sounded more uncertain now. For several long seconds, nothing happened. The hallway was completely still. Then, very slowly, the door handle moved. It turned on its own. I froze. The latch clicked softly, and the bathroom door slowly crept open a few inches, swinging inward just enough for the bright bathroom light to spill out into the hallway. I stood there staring at the empty doorway, my heart suddenly pounding, because I hadn't touched the handle. And as the door opened wider, I realized something that made the back of my neck prickle. From where I was standing, I could only see part of the bathroom. But what I could see told me one thing very clearly. The room inside was empty. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring into the bathroom. The light hummed softly above the mirror, filling the small room with a steady white glow. The sink was dry. The shower curtain hung still. No one was behind the door or tucked into the corner. The room was empty. I stepped forward slowly and pushed the door open the rest of the way. Nothing. The window above the bathtub was closed and locked just like it always was. There wasn't anywhere for someone to hide. I reached in and turned off the light. The hallway immediately felt darker. As I stepped back out and pulled the bathroom door halfway closed, I tried to convince myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe the latch hadn't caught properly. Maybe when I turned the handle earlier, it loosened and the door finally opened on its own. It sounded reasonable enough in my head. Still, the quiet upstairs hallway suddenly felt very different than it had a few minutes earlier. I started walking back toward the stairs. Halfway down the hall, I stopped. There was a sound behind me. Very faint. A slow movement across carpet. I turned around. The hallway behind me was empty. The guest room door sat slightly open like it had before, the darkness inside the room blending with the shadows of the hall. For several seconds, I didn't move. The house was silent again. I exhaled slowly and turned back toward the stairs. That's when I heard it. A footstep. Not downstairs. Up here. I froze instantly. The sound came from somewhere near the far end of the hallway, soft and slow, like someone shifting their weight carefully. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned my head just slightly, looking over my shoulder. At first, I saw nothing. Then something moved. A shadow passed across the wall near the guest room door. It was quick, just a dark shape sliding across the hallway for a second before disappearing again. I didn't wait to confirm what I had seen. I turned and walked quickly into my parents' bedroom, stepping inside and gently closing the door behind me without letting it latch. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. For a moment, I considered calling the police right away, but a part of me still hoped there was some explanation I hadn't thought of yet. Instead, I called my friend, Mark. The phone rang quietly as I crouched beside the bed, staring at the bedroom door. Mark answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" I lowered my voice. I think someone might be in my house." There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, another sound came from the hallway. A slow step across the floor.
then another. The floorboards creaked softly as whoever it was moved through the upstairs hallway. Not rushing, not searching loudly, just walking slowly, like they already knew the house. I stayed on the phone with Mark while the footsteps continued in the hallway. At one point, they stopped right outside the bedroom door. I held my breath and stared at the handle, expecting it to turn at any second. The door wasn't locked. I had closed it quietly but never actually clicked it shut. On the other end of the phone, Mark kept whispering questions. "Did you call the police?" "Not yet," I whispered back. "Call them right now." The floor creaked again outside the door. A slow step, then another. Whoever was out there started moving away down the hallway. That was enough for me. With my free hand, I opened the emergency dial screen and called the police while Mark stayed on the line. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained that I thought someone was inside the house. The dispatcher told me officers were already on the way. The next few minutes felt unbelievably long. Every small sound in the house made my heart jump. A faint thump somewhere above the ceiling, the quiet creak of wood shifting. At one point, I thought I heard movement downstairs. Then, finally, red and blue lights flashed through the bedroom window. I heard car doors slam outside. Moments later, a loud knock echoed through the front door. "Police!" I rushed downstairs and unlocked it as quickly as I could. 2 officers stepped inside and immediately began asking questions, while another circled around the back of the house. Within seconds, they were moving through every room with flashlights. Closets, bathrooms, the garage, every part of the first floor. Then we went upstairs. My chest tightened as we reached the hallway again. Everything looked exactly the same as before. The bathroom door sat halfway open. The guest room was empty. One officer checked each room while the other scanned the ceiling with his flashlight. That's when he stopped. "Hey," he said quietly. His light was pointed at the center of the hallway ceiling. I followed the beam upward. The square attic access panel was slightly open, just a few inches. I had walked past that spot twice earlier that night, and it had been completely closed. The officer pulled a chair from the guest room and climbed up carefully, pushing the panel the rest of the way open. A wave of warm, dusty air drifted down from the attic. He lifted himself halfway inside and shined his flashlight around. Then he went very still. "What is it?" the other officer asked. "There's stuff up here." They brought down several things: a thin blanket, an empty water bottle, a backpack with clothes inside, and a small flashlight. Someone had been staying up there. Not permanently, but long enough to leave things behind. I stood there in the hallway staring at the pile of items on the floor while a slow, unsettling thought formed in my mind. If the attic door had already been open earlier that night, then whoever had been walking through the hallway might have been inside the house long before I got home that weekend. It was a little after midnight when the knock came. Not loud, just 3 steady taps against the front door. I had been sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, half watching a movie and half scrolling through my phone. The house was quiet, and the sound of the knock immediately made me sit up. No one ever came to our house that late. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined it. Then it happened again. 3 more knocks, slow, firm. I muted the TV and listened. The rest of the house was completely silent. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and my younger brother was staying at a friend's house, so I knew I was the only person home. Another knock came a few seconds later. This time, I stood up. Our front door had a small window beside it that looked out onto the porch, but the angle made it hard to see who was standing directly in front of the door. I walked slowly toward it anyway. The porch light was already on, casting a yellow glow across the front steps. As I got closer, I could see the edge of someone's shoulder through the glass. There was definitely a person standing outside. I stopped a few feet from the door. "Hello?" I called out. A man's voice answered almost immediately. "Hey, sorry to bother you this late." He sounded calm, maybe a little tired. "My car broke down the street. I was wondering if I could use your phone for a minute." I didn't move any closer to the door. Through the window, I could see part of him now. He looked like he was in his late 20s or early 30s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His hands were in his pockets as he stood on the porch. "My phone died. I just need to call someone to come get me." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt bad. If someone's car really had broken down nearby, it would make sense for them to knock on a door for help. But another part of me felt uneasy. It was the middle of the night, and I was alone in the house. "I can call someone for you," I said through the door, "if you tell me the number." There was a short pause outside. "Oh," he said. Yeah, that might work." He shifted slightly on the porch, leaning a little closer to the door. "Actually," he said after a moment, "would it be okay if I just used your phone real quick? It'll only take a second." I shook my head, even though he probably couldn't see me clearly through the glass. "I'd rather not open the door," I said. Another brief silence followed. Then he chuckled softly. "Yeah, I get that." But as he stood there on the porch, something about the situation started to feel a little strange. Because if his car had really broken down just down the street, I couldn't see it anywhere from the front of the house.
For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The man remained on the porch, standing just outside the door with his hands in his jacket pockets. I stayed where I was in the hallway, keeping a few feet between myself and the door. The porch light made it easy to see him through the narrow window beside the frame. He looked normal enough at first glance. Average height, dark jacket, slight stubble on his face. But something about the situation didn't sit right with me. "You said your car broke down?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied quickly, "just down the road a little." I glanced past him through the window, looking down the quiet street. There were only a few streetlights along our block, but they lit the road well enough that I could see a good distance in both directions. No car with its hazard lights on, no vehicle pulled over along the curb, just the empty street stretching away in the darkness. "How far down?" I asked. "Oh, not far," he said, "like a block or two." His answer came a little too fast. I kept my voice calm. "What kind of car is it?" There was a short pause. "A gray one," he said. That made me frown. A gray one. That wasn't really an answer. Through the window, I watched him shift his weight on the porch. He glanced briefly over his shoulder toward the street before looking back at the door. "Look," he said, his tone slightly more impatient now, "I just need to make a quick call. It'll take 10 seconds. "I can still call someone for you," I replied. Another pause. Then he rubbed the back of his neck like he was thinking. "Actually," he said slowly, "I think I left the number in my phone, which is dead." I didn't respond. The silence between us stretched for a moment. Then, something caught my attention. When he turned his head again, his eyes flicked past the house toward the street behind him. I followed his glance. At first, I didn't notice anything. Then I saw it. Near the end of the driveway, where the shadows from the trees met the edge of the road, someone was standing there. A second person. They were farther away, half hidden in the darkness near the curb. I hadn't noticed them before because they weren't moving. But now that my eyes adjusted, I could clearly make out the shape of someone standing beside the street, watching the house. A cold feeling spread through my chest. The man on the porch noticed where I was looking. For the first time since he knocked, his expression changed slightly. He shifted his body, stepping just a little closer to the door. "Everything okay in there?" I stepped back from the door, because at that moment, the whole situation finally clicked into place. The man on the porch wasn't the real problem. He was just the distraction. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The man remained on the porch, standing just outside the door with his hands in his jacket pockets. I stayed where I was in the hallway, keeping a few feet between myself and the door. The porch light made it easy to see him through the narrow window beside the frame. He looked normal enough at first glance. Average height, dark jacket, slight stubble on his face. But something about the situation didn't sit right with me. "You said your car broke down?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied quickly, "just down the road a little." I glanced past him through the window, looking down the quiet street. There were only a few streetlights along our block, but they lit the road well enough that I could see a good distance in both directions. No car with its hazard lights on, no vehicle pulled over along the curb, just the empty street stretching away in the darkness. "How far down?" I asked. "Oh, not far," he said, "like a block or two." His answer came a little too fast. I kept my voice calm. "What kind of car is it?" There was a short pause. "A gray one," he said. That made me frown. A gray one. That wasn't really an answer. Through the window, I watched him shift his weight on the porch. He glanced briefly over his shoulder toward the street before looking back at the door. "Look," he said, his tone slightly more impatient now, "I just need to make a quick call. It'll take 10 seconds. "I can still call someone for you," I replied. Another pause. Then he rubbed the back of his neck like he was thinking. "Actually," he said slowly, "I think I left the number in my phone, which is dead." I didn't respond. The silence between us stretched for a moment. Then, something caught my attention. When he turned his head again, his eyes flicked past the house toward the street behind him. I followed his glance. At first, I didn't notice anything. Then I saw it. Near the end of the driveway, where the shadows from the trees met the edge of the road, someone was standing there. A second person. They were farther away, half hidden in the darkness near the curb. I hadn't noticed them before because they weren't moving. But now that my eyes adjusted, I could clearly make out the shape of someone standing beside the street, watching the house. A cold feeling spread through my chest. The man on the porch noticed where I was looking. For the first time since he knocked, his expression changed slightly. He shifted his body, stepping just a little closer to the door. "Everything okay in there?" I stepped back from the door, because at that moment, the whole situation finally clicked into place. The man on the porch wasn't the real problem. He was just the distraction. I stayed crouched behind the couch while the dispatcher kept talking to me through the phone. She asked for my address again and told me officers were already on their way. I whispered answers as quietly as I could, my eyes locked on the dark hallway that led toward the kitchen. For several seconds, there was no sound. Then, the handle at the back door moved again. A slow metal click echoed faintly through the house. I felt my stomach drop. Whoever was outside wasn't rushing. They weren't kicking the door or trying to force their way in. Just like the man at the front door earlier, they were trying the handle carefully, quietly, like they hoped it might already be unlocked. I could picture someone standing just outside the glass door, turning the handle a little at a time and listening for movement inside. The dispatcher's voice was still in my ear, asking if I could see anyone. "I can't," I whispered, "but someone's at the back door." The handle stopped moving. For a moment, the house went completely silent again. Then I heard footsteps outside. They moved slowly across the wooden deck behind the house before fading toward the side yard. "He's leaving," I whispered. "Officers are almost there," the dispatcher replied. Less than a minute later, flashing red and blue lights spilled across the front windows of the house. I heard a car door slam, followed by quick footsteps running up the driveway. The moment the police knocked, I ran to the door and unlocked it. 2 officers came inside while another circled around the back of the house with a flashlight. They checked every room first: the kitchen, the hallway, the bedrooms upstairs. No one was inside. Then one of the officers stepped outside to speak with the other patrol unit that had just arrived. When he came back in, his expression had changed slightly. He asked me to describe the man who had knocked on the door. After I finished, he nodded slowly. "You did the right thing not opening the door," he said. Apparently, there had been several reports in nearby neighborhoods over the past few weeks. Late at night, someone would knock on a door claiming they needed help. Car trouble, a dead phone, some kind of emergency. While the homeowner was distracted at the front door, another person would circle around the house looking for an unlocked entrance, a back door, a garage, an open window. 2 men working together. The officer said they had seen a vehicle leaving the area just before they arrived, but they hadn't caught up to it. Before leaving, he said something that stuck with me long after the house was quiet again. Most of the time, he explained, these situations only worked if someone opened the door, if the person inside felt bad enough to help. Later that night, after the police were gone and the house was silent again, I kept thinking about that knock at the door. Because if I had opened it for even a few seconds, the second man might already have been inside the house behind me.